I hate being right about things being done in the name of evil. I hate being right when I make predictions about bad things that will happen. And that's exactly what is happening. I called it when I said families will be sending their children unaccompanied across the border, knowing that if the whole family went to the border, they would just be turned away. But if their kid went by themselves, that Joe Biden wouldn't turn them away. He would just throw them in cages. And guess what? A few weeks later, after I predicted that, it turned out to be true. What did I say about the Atlanta shooter? Not racially motivated. I predicted it was not racially motivated. I predicted it was most likely due to sex trafficking and prostitution. And it turns out that it's probably that it's probably the case. And then I predicted it was probably due to the existential angst of radical feminism, basically a burden on men, suppressing thousands of years of biological instinct because toxic masculinity is bad. And to be a man in society in 2021, to exhibit any trait of masculinity is seen as bad, it's seen as evil. And men should be feminine, or so we're told. But now we're seeing the reaction to that, to a decade of radical feminism. You have two shootings involving 21-year-old men who both essentially did not have a girlfriend. The person in Atlanta shot up rub and tug joints, essentially. And now this person in Boulder, Colorado posted hashtag I need a girlfriend. A lonely, young, most likely zero sexual partners that they didn't have to pay, possible mental health disorders. Of course, you're most likely going to have mental health disorders if you're being told not to act on your base instincts. If your base instinct is to participate in sports and you're told that no, don't participate in sports because that's being too competitive, and being too competitive is toxic masculinity, then they won't do that. They won't have an outlet for their masculinity. And then if they see someone that they wish to court, if they see an attractive, what they find to be an attractive woman, and they want to go talk to them, I'm not talking about clubbing them over at their head and dragging them by their hair to their cave and just mounting them and then just basically making them their mate. You're my mate. Like it probably was done tens of thousands of years ago. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about Neanderthals here. I'm talking about, hey, how are you doing? In you're sparking up a conversation, you're talking, and eventually you go, would you like to go out to eat sometime? Would you like to go get a drink? Would you like to do X, Y, or Z? But that's seen as toxic masculinity. And there is the problem. But before we continue, why don't you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please leave a comment down below. It helps with the algorithm. So I'm going to briefly touch on basically the mainstream media, how they basically pushed conspiracy theories, hardcore conspiracy theories that were just fake, didn't retract, didn't recant. And then when they're basically told that they were just pushing conspiracy theories, what's their defense? Well, I'm right 90% of the time, and this is just an outlier, guys. I'm right when I say that most mass shootings are done by white people. This just happens to be an outlier. So we can still have that conversation. Just because this guy isn't white doesn't mean I was wrong. Well, no, you were right. You were saying that this was a white supremacist shooting. You can't make this stuff up. As soon as a shooting was reported at Boulder, Colorado grocery store, members of the media and activists rushed to insist the shooter must be white, and specifically a white supremacist, before his identity was even released. Amy Siskind, a feminist activist, said the shooter was almost certainly a white man because he was apprehended. Once she learned the race of the suspect, however, she pivoted to suggesting people mourn the victims and not focus on the identity of the killer. Author Mina Harris, niece of Vice President Kamala Harris, posted then deleted a tweet declaring, "Violent men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country." Can't make this up, guys. The family of the Vice President of the United States saying white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. It's getting bananas, guys. I feel sorry for white people. There's no other way to say this. From CJ Whirlman, the suspected gunman in the Boulder, Colorado mass shooting is a white guy, 7 reported dead. Q, mental issues, bad day, parking dispute, or anything else other than he is most likely is a white domestic terrorist. And I can't help but notice a lot of these people are white. I don't even know how to describe it. What is it called when you just hate your own? When you just hate yourself for your skin color? I don't know how these people just don't take the bedsheet exit. If they hate white people this much and they're white themselves, they blame white men for everything. And these are white men. Why haven't you just killed yourself? I don't understand. How can you walk around as a white man knowing that you're part of the problem? Not telling you to kill yourself, but just asking the question. Just asking the question. I don't understand. I don't understand. Explain it to me. Explain it to me in the comments down below. From Dylan Park, a white man walked into a grocery store in Boulder, killed 10 people, and was apprehended by the police and walked out of the building completely unharmed. Fake news. He was shot in the leg. Right down the road, police killed Elijah McClain while he apologized for not doing anything wrong. 2 different Americas. This just from Tay Anderson. Doesn't really even merit me reading that. From Kasim Rashid, Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old black child. Police shot him in 1.7 seconds and let him suffer in agonizing pain for 4 minutes and die. Colorado terrorist is a homegrown white man. It turns out not to be true. Who killed 10 people, including a cop. Cops arrested him alive and helped him to a stretcher for immediate medical care. So what I don't believe that a lot of these left-wingers understand that cops actually prefer taking in the shooter alive so they can understand this thing called the motivation. They want to make sure that that person wasn't part of some terror cell, because nothing is scarier than finding out that this guy's from Syria and having killed him and not understanding if he was part of some sort of terror network. Again, not pushing some sort of Islamophobic conspiracy theory. I'm just pushing out a hypothetical situation because that definitely could have been the case. What happens if this young man from Syria, right? And I know it's horrible to assert this, but it's definitely a possibility. Could have been a possibility, but it's not. It doesn't appear to be. But what happens if this young man from Syria was part of a terrorist network? He was dealing with the existential angst. He was easily recruited because of his repressed masculinity. This has been proven. This is all stuff that's proven, that people who feel their masculinity is repressed, they're more likely to join extremist organizations because it allows them to feel more masculine because they have power over others when they commit acts of violence. So they basically, by being violent, they then feel masculine. So in that sense, toxic masculinity is a thing. But being a man in the sense of just living your day-to-day life shouldn't be considered toxic masculinity. And I'll explain that here in a minute. Just explaining why people join terror networks. This is research that you can find online. But turns out he's part of a terror cell, terror network, but they don't know which terror network because they killed him. And then all his internet traffic was encrypted and they can't hack into his computers. And he was using Tor and VPNs, so they can't really figure out what was going on because he was using Tor and VPNs, but kind of just low-key stuff to kind of browse the internet and stuff like that. So apparently the FBI was kind of keeping a passive eye on him, but wasn't 100% sure what was going on. So if they would have just killed him and he had been part of a terror network who was planning mass shootings around the country, and then they kill him and they can't find that network and more shootings happen, guess what? Maybe they could have prevented those other shootings by not killing the shooter. That's typically why police go out of their way to not kill the shooter. They want to ensure that this isn't some sort of elaborate plot, that it's not, that they would rather find out, they would rather keep you alive and find out that you're a lone wolf than kill you, have no cops die while basically engaging the shooter, right? They could have just smoked him right away. Possibly. Not 100% sure of how it went down with the cop. But say the cop smoked him right away and only one or two people died instead of 10. But now they don't know. Now we're spending weeks digging into this person, figuring out if there's some sort of terror network. But of course, the mainstream media wouldn't push that because that wouldn't fit the narrative. It would just go into the black hole of the internet. So it's like an onion. There's just more to it than these Democrats know, and they're just so low information. Or they're just low information voters, guys, and that's why I think they say it shouldn't be harder to vote than it is to buy a gun. And my defense is, well, it is harder to buy a gun than it is to vote because it took me 5 minutes to vote. It doesn't take me 5 minutes to buy a gun, but it should be easier to buy a gun than it is to vote because you have the right to, or you by voting can affect my life. And you obviously are stupid. And that's a threat to me. It's just bananas on so many levels. From Kurt Schleichter. Basically, he just posted the screenshots from Amy Siskin. From Andy No, the suspect in Boulder, Colorado shooting where 10 were murdered had been identified. He was first described as a white male. His social media, which is now deleted, show he was a religious Muslim who posted frequently about Islamophobia. From Jack Posobiec. Less than 1 week between these tweets, it isn't hard to understand why it's so normalized for law enforcement to protect the humanity of white mass murderers and their willingness to continuously make excuses for them. The shooter's race or ethnicity seems front and center when they aren't white. This is the updated tweet. Otherwise, it's just a mentally ill young man having a bad day. Narratives drive our responses to awful crimes committed against innocent people. Pay attention to the responses and who is targeted. So now that it's a man from Syria, if you point out that he's from Syria, you are a racist. Don't you forget it. When it's a white man, it's okay. He's just a white mass murderer, and their willingness to make excuses for them because the white devil. But now if you point out, hey, he's not white, he's actually from Syria. Well, if you have to point out he's from Syria, then you're a racist, good sir. And racists are not allowed in the United States. That is un-American. And you are a bigger threat to this country than that person who shot 10 people in a grocery store. Because white nationalists are a threat to national security. Just this kind of double talk is bananas. I don't understand the standard that's going on. So my tweet in response to Newsweek, Boulder Shooters Facebook posts about Islam and needing a girlfriend. The repression of masculinity. Unfortunately, this is a beginning of the consequences of repressing thousands of years of biological instinct. Some of Ahmad Alissa's past Facebook gotta scroll up. The suspect in the Boulder shooting posted on his Facebook page about Islam, kickboxing, and needing a girlfriend. Authorities on Tuesday identified the 21-year-old of Colorado as the gunman who had allegedly opened fire inside the King supermarket on Monday, killing 10 people, including a police officer. He has been charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder, Boulder Police Chief Maris Harold said. Authorities revealed little about the suspected shooter in Tuesday's news conference, but a Facebook page that appeared to belong to the suspect provided some further details. Guys, hashtag I need a girlfriend. He was bullied in high school. He was kind of an outcast. He didn't really fit in. He didn't have an outlet for his masculinity. You have these young men being told to be masculine is to be toxic. And toxic masculinity is bad. It is frowned upon. It has no place in 2021. You are violent if you're masculine. That's seen as an act of violence. Just approaching a woman and saying, hey, would you like to go get a drink sometime? That's seen as violence. That's seen as repressive to women. It doesn't make any sense because women still like to be courted, from my understanding. Even younger women still like men approaching them. They still like confident men. Yet young men are told to not be confident. They're told to not approach women, that women will approach them. And you have 30% of men from 18 to 30 have zero sexual partners because they're not even approaching women, most likely. They think they'll eventually find me, but they're not finding them. And on Tinder, you're competing against the top 80%. Like, unless you're in the top 20% of men, you're not going to have a chance on Tinder. because it's literally just how good you look. And a lot of these men aren't the best looking men. They would have better chances at the bar, in the library, at getting soup at the grocery store, and just having a friendly conversation. And basically say, hey, can I have your phone number? Perhaps we can go out sometime and I'd like to get you a drink and we can talk more. What's so hard about that? But if you're dependent on that little thing in your pocket, that cell phone, and you think your dream woman, that perfect 10 for you, it's gonna magically come out of the blue through Bumble or Tinder or whatever, it ain't gonna happen, dude. It ain't gonna happen. You need to make yourself available. However, radical feminism states that that is toxic masculinity, and to even talk to a woman is just violent. You can't approach a woman. That's violence. You're going to make her feel uncomfortable. You're just treating her like an object. You're only talking to her because you're just a sex addict. It's BS on so many levels. So repressed masculinity is the only type of toxic masculinity there is. There's only one form of toxic masculinity, and that is repressed masculinity. Oppressed masculinity becomes repressed masculinity, which turns to depressed masculinity. All that rhyming simply means when you're told to bottle up all of that biological programming, it makes you a sad individual and kills a piece of who you are as a man. Constantly suppressing your natural instinct gets you to the point where you feel like you're breathing through a straw. Yeah, you're still around, but are you really living? Can you actually do anything when you're barely conscious? That's the problem we're facing. Years back, young men were told to stifle anything which came with being a male. Competitiveness. Instead, it doesn't matter who wins. We all get participation ribbons, guys. A more stoic approach to handling emotions. Instead, share everything. I kind of disagree with this. While I understand the stoic approach to handling emotions, that is a better approach to masculinity than the actual medical journal I'm going to show you here in a second. Aggressiveness. Don't be direct in any pursuit of anything. And aggressiveness here, I don't think of that as physical aggressiveness. I think of that as in if you want something, right, you have to go build it. You have to be aggressive in your mindset. If I'm going to build a business, if I want to be successful, guess what? Or even on this podcast, right? On this YouTube channel, I have to be aggressive as in I have to do it. I have to get off my butt or actually sit my butt in this chair, turn on the camera, make sure that the lighting is set up and record it. I have to be aggressive in my mindset and accomplish my task for the day. Right? It takes a lot of time. It's easy to slack off. It's easy to go, I don't want to do it. And there's times where yesterday I only did the one video because it was kind of a slow news day for one. And for two, I really wanted to see how the Colorado shooting played out, how basically the news cycle was going. The video was longer than most of my videos. So I felt like just doing the one video, to be honest. So today I'm going to make up for it most likely, but we'll see how that goes. These women become more womanly. They grew up confused, then they had children of their own, and now those kids are all messed up because their model of what makes a man, their father, has no idea who he is. He's been treated as a defective girl his whole life, and then he unknowingly plays a role in ensuring that the cycle continues. So, men, or the fix to this is you. And this is kind of his call to action. Men, I call on each of you now to express what it is that makes you a man. Authentic masculine expression comes from the harmonization of the three aspects to the self, which exists inside each of us. You've got to absolutely own the physical self, the mental self, the spiritual self. How do you develop these aspects of who you are? For starters, you stop trying to be the guy you think people will like. Instead, do you. Whatever it is you're trying to get from life, get it without the desire of permission from others. Without resistance, the body will grow. Without putting stress on the body, you'll neither be able to appreciate the beauty of it, nor will you ever know what it is capable of. There are plenty of men out there who watch movies and think to themselves, if that happened to me, I'd rise to the occasion. Kind of like I talked about during the Colorado shooting, where they're basically, it was something, it was the subway incident where you had an assault on an elderly Asian man, and you had the bystanders saying, if this happened again, I'd do the right thing. No, you wouldn't, because the first time you froze. And this is a perfect example of that. You're one of those guys who, or I'd like to ask you, why do you think you can do those things? Have you practiced any of them? Have you put yourself in those situations in a training environment? Or, as it is the case with most, do you just assume you've got the natural skill sets to do what it takes others years to achieve at the whim of fortune? The mentality. And he talks about you must lift weights. Oh, he talks about weightlifting. This is actually pretty important. So I'm going to actually say this. Have you put yourself in those situations in a training environment? Or is it the case with most? You just assume you got the natural skill set. And I said that. How our body adapts to the stress placed on it. I'm not going to tell you what it is you must create with regards to programming, as I know nothing about you. Weightlifting and strength training as a whole are instrumental to overall development of the physical self. There is literally no downside to weightlifting. You must lift weights. And this is important. For thousands of years, men killed things. Men defended their families. Men, by being strong, were attractive. They attracted mates, right? They found women they wanted to court. Those women also found them attractive, and then they mated and they paired. That's the way history played out. That's the way humans function. If you're weak, if you can't provide, if you can't protect your family, if you can't hunt for food, if you can't do anything physically, if you're gasping for air just getting off the couch, you're worthless. Get in shape. Take care of yourself. Mentally, it seems to me that the majority of men out there know that their minds are in shambles, yet they have no clue how to fix it. So they add more to it. They create more stuff and fill it with more thinking that they're lacking in something. Gentlemen, I will tell you now, you do not need more. You need less. In order to reach the greatest heights in development and the strongest mental self you can, you've got to remove the unessential. Get rid of that stuff that is clogging up your daily life, not just inside your head, but also in the environment which your head spends its time in as well. Your mental clutter could be seeking approval from your parents, keeping the wife happy, playing it safe and doing what you're supposed to do, keeping up with the Joneses, trying to control things you have no control over, giving time vampires your most valuable resources, your time, confusing accumulation of stuff as accumulation of happiness, identifying with mainstream media or politics, avoiding confrontation with who you are versus who you want to be, living in the mold created by society. You need to break that mold. You need to figure out what you want to be and find that path and set on that path. Each of these things plagues plugged in men in our society, some much more than others. The fact is, until you tackle whatever issues you've built in your mind, you'll never achieve the optimal level of mental health. I'm not happy all the time, but I'm generally very happy, dude. I'm generally a very happy dude. I'm happy because there is no clutter in my mind anymore. How did I reach my point? I faced my demons head on. And there was a video by David Goggins. Basically, he was running, I think it was on Christmas Day. And basically, you got to stare those demons in the face and you got to make them your bitch, right? You deal with the demons. You can't kill your demons. You can't make them go away, but you can essentially just make them your bitch. But you have to do it every day. Every day you wake up and you're just feeling like a bag of crap and you don't want to do anything. You don't want to progress. If there is clutter in your bedroom, how can you sleep peacefully? If your writing area is a mess, how can you remain focused when writing? If your living room looks like it came from a magazine, how can you say it represents who you are as a man? You don't have to live a life as a minimalist, but more does not equal better. Spiritually, we're all connected on a level we don't fully understand or appreciate, but connected we are nonetheless. To one author, to nature, to life itself. Ever wonder why going for a walk without electronics clears the mind? Because you connect with your natural state of being, you're living more optimally. Your soul is breathing. Look at the men who are writing for their fellow man. There are hundreds, maybe thousands out there writing day and night with the hope that they can help a man who is lost. I call it throwing ropes. Men are stuck in the cycle of self-loathing, repressing themselves with the hope that it will make them feel better and be a better man, as society has said it would, but it just confines them more. It digs them deeper in a hole until they can no longer see the world around them, just the walls which have been built, blocking their souls out of reach from their brethren. When a man writes for his fellow man, he throws a rope into that hole. And if that man has it in him or something awakens him to seeing the rope, he may choose to climb. If he does, he may then join the ranks of rope throwers, or he may move on, allowing his soul to reconnect with his fellow men in life. So, from medical news today, the exact definition of toxic masculinity has evolved over time. This harmful concept of masculinity also places significant importance on manliness based on strength, lack of emotion, self sufficiency, dominance, sexual virility. This lack of emotion thing, I think, is BS. And I can't believe this is coming from a medical news today because honestly, some of the most masculine men that I know, when you think of like a man's man, like alpha men, have a lot of emotion. They're very emotional, but they show the appropriate level emotion. They show the appropriate emotion when it's time to be emotional. They're emotional. It's not just unhinged. It's not, they don't laugh when everybody's crying. They don't just, they don't flip a table because they what is it, the movie Anger Management, when I said over easy and he throws the plate up against the wall. That's not manliness, in my opinion. But they say that that's toxic masculinity. I say that that's traits of anger. That's traits of mental health disorders. Could be depression, being a sociopath, right? It could be so many things. It's hard to say. Overemphasis on these traits may lead to harmful imbalances in someone trying to live up to these expectations. Some examples include aggression, sexual aggression or control, showing no emotion or suppressing emotions, hypercompetitiveness, needing to dominate or control others, a tendency towards glorification of violence, isolation, low empathy, entitlement, chauvinism, and sexism. Depression. What would depression have? You would have possible aggression. You would have showing no emotion or suppressing emotions. You would have a tenant or possibly a tendency towards glorification of violence. That could be a sign of depression. You'd have isolation, low empathy. You'd have those things going on. Let's see what that author wrote about toxic masculinity. He hates the term. I rarely use it as I don't speak of made up stuff. I speak of toxic masculinity in the same light I do of Santa Claus or unicorns. It's not real. If someone were to try to actually create a definition of the label, then it should be as I described: a beaten man, a man who has repressed his character, a man who is but a shell afraid to make waves in the world. That is toxic. And I think that perfectly paints those young men. They're just sad shells. They don't know what to do with themselves. Existential angst, their struggle of life. Their biological urges, thousands of years of programming. They don't know what to do with themselves and then they break. And unfortunately, when they break everything around them. And that's why I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's toxic to the man, and unfortunately, it's a toxic poison seeping into the generations which follow. Young men need positive examples of masculinity. They need to see men who share their genuine selves without hesitation. The future men who are observing us will follow our example, not our advice. We need to ensure we are choosing to be who we are and not who society has told us to be. There's nothing wrong with a woman expressing her she power. It's pushed everywhere. It's time we do the same and start to change the landscape of society. Mainstream media wants to oppress our boys. Let's fight back by doubling down on our commitment to living our lives in our terms, whatever that may mean for you. There's nothing wrong with being a man. Every time you repress yourself, you're taking a scoop of dirt from the spiritual ground. You can only dig so many times before you've reached 6 feet and your grave is all ready for you to climb into. You cannot self-sacrifice your way to happiness. You've got to start putting yourself first and stop trying to be the man you've been told to be by society. Be your own man. Learn how to do that by men who are walking their own path. Someday, if not already, you'll be the man who is the role model for the next generation of men. Be the best example you can to ensure they do not have to climb from the hole you did. Take care, brothers, and remember there is no such thing as toxic masculinity, except the kind which we try to hide from the world. Express it, do not suppress it ever again. Take action and take care. So, guys, this is pretty strongly worded, definitely using language that I can't necessarily use on YouTube. But I agree with a lot of what he put in this because it's not coming from a position of, we need to be strong. He's like, no, we just need to. Men have an urge to build things. Go and build a picnic table. Jack Murphy posted a picture. Hey, me and my son, I took my son to the hardware store. We built a picnic table. Eventually, we're going to build a picnic table. We built a picnic table. Then we're going to start building bigger things, better things. Eventually, we're going to build our home by hand. That's his goal. He wants to build. That's his urge. That's his drive. Why suppress that? What's so toxic about a man wanting to build his own house for his family? How's that seen as toxic? If anything, I'm agreeing with Zach. It's more toxic to go, well, I'll hire somebody else to build my house for me because, well, I shouldn't do it because it's a bad stereotype if I were to build my own house because it would, show that I can build something with my own hands. And, you know, obviously, if I believe I can build it, I'm taking that away from a woman. And that's toxic masculinity, or so says radical feminists. This is important. And I think he nailed it. This guy nailed it. I may not agree with everything on his website. There's a lot of things that are pretty fringe on his website, but this one article, this letter he wrote, I agree with 90% of the stuff in this article. It's very well written. It's very insightful, in my opinion, because these boys are being raised to hate themselves for the crime of being a man. And that's wrong. And that's, God, that's horrible. You're creating an entire generation of men who hate themselves. What do you think is going to happen in the long term? I'll leave you with that. Leave a comment down below what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see y'all later. Have a good one.